We need to talk about Donald Trump taking steps to ban trans troops and the military, freezing federal loans and grants, firing prosecutors who helped criminally investigate him, and ordering the CDC to stop working with the World Health Organization immediately. And if all of that feels overwhelming, arguably that's part of the point. We're constantly flooding the zone with so much it scatters and confuses your opposition. And there have been 9 straight days of that, but we're gonna make it consumable for right now. So let's start with the 4 executive orders that Donald Trump signed yesterday focused on the military. The order there that's gotten the most attention being the one that paves the way for a ban on transgender troops. Because specifically, the order doesn't immediately ban trans people from serving, but rather it directs the Pentagon to revise medical standards, arguing that the department's policy for troop readiness is, quote, inconsistent with medical, surgical, and mental health constraints on individuals with gender dysphoria. And then adding, many mental and physical health conditions are incompatible with active duty, from conditions that require substantial medication or medical treatment to bipolar and related disorders, eating disorders, suicidality, and prior psychiatric hospitalization. Now with that, something that's very notable and you might be able to see is that this doesn't just apply to trans people. You have experts saying that this list could impact tens of thousands of people with various health conditions depending on how it's interpreted. But the order makes it very clear that trans people are the main intended target here, with it appearing to aim at them in personal terms and claiming that, quote, expressing a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service. With it then going on to accuse trans troops of going against a soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle, even in one's personal life, and adding, a man's assertion that he is a woman and his requirement that others honor this falsehood is not consistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. But with all that, it's now being reported that rights groups are already preparing to file a lawsuit against this order, so we're gonna have to wait to see what happens there. And again, that was just one action that was focused on the military that Trump took yesterday. He also signed 2 separate orders directing the Pentagon to end DEI programs and start the process of creating a next-generation missile defense shield for the United States that Trump is calling the Iron Dome for America, or with that being in reference to Israel's infamous defense system. And then, the final order, it would reinstate and offer back pay to members of the military who were discharged for refusing to get the COVID vaccine as mandated by the Pentagon. Though there, it's unclear right now how many people that's going to impact because the Biden administration actually rescinded the vaccine mandate 2 years ago. Though we do know just over 100 of the more than 8,000 service members who were discharged have rejoined. Right, so those were the military orders. But then we got to move on to another big piece of Trump administration news, and that being that the White House Office of Management and Budget, right, OMB, they've ordered a pause on federal grants and loans, effectively freezing trillions of dollars. And this move was announced in a 2-page memo sent to agencies late last night, with the action set to take effect at 5 p.m. today. And this decision has set off a massive wave of panic and confusion because the memo is incredibly vague and it's really unclear how far-reaching this is going to be or how long it'll even be in place. Right, the memo outlining the move only states that agencies, quote, must temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance and other relevant agency activities that may be implicated by the executive orders, including but not limited to financial assistance for foreign aid, non-governmental organizations, DEI, woke gender ideology, and the Green New Deal, with them then ordering all agencies to complete a comprehensive analysis to identify programs, projects, and activities that could go against Trump's executive orders. Though it also doesn't set a date for when the freeze will be lifted, saying only that the agencies need to report their findings to OMB by February 10th, right? And asserting that agencies must keep the pause on grants and loans in place until OMB has reviewed their findings and provided guidance to each agency. And one of the big things there is that could take a while. We're talking about every single federal agency trying to figure out if many programs that they oversee go against Trump's orders, which is why we're seeing agencies scrambling to try and figure out what this means. And as they do, the pause will disrupt and delay funding that fuels the American economy and serves tens of millions of people, potentially, hundreds. Where we're seeing experts saying the memo could halt tons of essential federal functions, including hundreds of billions of dollars in grants to state, local, and tribal governments, disaster relief aid, funding for transportation, homeless shelters, key programs that help the most vulnerable Americans, and much more. And the thing is, that even includes some projects that directly advance Trump's own agenda, like one that helps state and federal law enforcement counter drug trafficking organizations. But some of the biggest questions here have been how will this impact Medicaid and food stamps, which together are used by more than 100 million people. Where the memo said absolutely nothing about these essential programs, even while specifying that similar ones like Medicare and Social Security would not be impacted. And today, as I was filming this, we saw absolute chaos playing out in real time. Where when Trump's press secretary was asked whether Medicaid was frozen at a press conference, she was totally unable to answer the question, responding, "I'll check back on that." And she got so messy that the OMB issued another memo to agencies trying to clarify, saying that mandatory programs like Medicaid and SNAP will continue without pause. And then adding, among other programs, there also won't be pauses on funds for small businesses and farmers, Pell Grants for students, rental assistance, and Head Start, which promotes the school readiness for low-income families. With this new memo then also claiming that any program that provides direct benefits to Americans is explicitly excluded from the pause and exempted from this review process. But you also have people saying it's unclear what that means because a lot of federal money that goes to individuals is actually first given to states and organizations that then distribute it. And what's more, despite the new memo's claim that Medicaid won't be interrupted and Head Start wouldn't have funds paused, we saw numerous reports to the contrary. Providers who run Head Start programs reported today that they were unable to access federal funds because they lost access to the Federal Office of Head Start's payment site. You also had Senator Ron Wyden tweeting that his staff has confirmed reports that Medicaid portals are down in all 50 states following last night's federal funding freeze, with him then calling the move a blatant attempt to rip away health insurance from millions of Americans overnight and will get people killed. Though then with that, we did see Trump's press secretary sharing a statement on X in the afternoon saying, "The White House is aware of the Medicaid website portal outage. We have confirmed no payments have been affected. They are still being processed and sent. We expect the portal will be back online shortly." And I mean, you've got experts saying that this will have a whole other host of sweeping ramifications, with, for example, the chief executive of the National Council of Nonprofits saying in a statement, "From pausing research on cures for childhood cancer to halting food assistance, safety from domestic violence, and closing suicide hotlines, the impact of even a short pause in funding could be devastating and cost lives." And then claiming this order could decimate thousands of organizations and leave neighbors without the services they need. So the potential impact could be absolutely astronomical, but also there's a question about the legality. Because you see, the Constitution grants the power of the purse to Congress, which has already approved these funds and directed where they go. And so you have budget experts saying that while the president is generally allowed to freeze spending for a period of time, certain conditions must be met first. Right? For example, Trump would have to specify which budget accounts are frozen, and he has to have certain justification, with one expert even saying that pauses over policy disagreements are not legal, which is also why we've already seen lawsuits being filed challenging this freeze and Democrats widely decrying this move as illegal. With this, including Representative Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who tweeted, "Trump is holding all the nation's hospitals and vital services hostage to seize power from Congress and hand it over to billionaires." And adding, "We must state the truth. This is a constitutional crisis. It's a massive illegal power grab that the House and Senate have a sworn duty to stop." And so all of that, probably the biggest pieces of news, at least for now, but there are also two other things I want to quickly hit on. The first is that the Justice Department, under new management, announced yesterday that it's fired more than a dozen officials who worked on the two special counsel investigations into Donald Trump, with the DOJ saying in a statement that Acting Attorney General James McHenry informed the employees that he, quote, "does not trust these officials to assist in faithfully implementing the president's agenda." And in a letter sent to the fired officials that was obtained by the Washington Post, McHenry explicitly referenced Trump's repeated claims that the Biden administration weaponized law enforcement to undermine Biden's political enemies. But also here, we saw experts saying that this is actually exactly what Trump is doing with this move, going after his perceived opponents. But this, as they argue, it's not just political, saying that this move violates civil service protections for non-political employees and contradicts decades of civil service law that says employees can only be fired for misconduct or bad performance, not doing their jobs as directed. With, for example, Greg Brower, a U.S. attorney during the George W. Bush administration, saying that this move was totally unheard of, and adding, "This is unprecedented given the career status of these people, which makes them not subject to dismissal by the president and the apparent lack of any cause that the department has been able to articulate." So this is really notable, and while there have been and will continue to be a lot of firings as Trump continues his transition to power, these are distinctly different, which is also why it's so important to flag. But then, the final thing that I want to touch on in this batch is that the Trump administration has now asked CDC officials to stop working with the World Health Organization and cut off all communication. And this move comes 1 week after Trump issued an order beginning the process of withdrawing from the WHO. Still, you had experts saying this new demand, it comes as a surprise because Trump's order didn't take immediate effect, instead just kicking off the process. And what's more, there are several things that need to happen before the United States can leave the WHO. First and foremost, Congress actually has to approve the decision, and the United States also needs to provide a 1-year notice and meet its financial obligations for the fiscal year. So the sudden shift seems to go against the expected timeline, and one expert even said, "Stopping communications and meetings with WHO is a big problem. People thought there would be a slow withdrawal. This has really caught everyone with their pants down," and adding that talking to WHO is a two-way street, because both agencies are in contact daily and benefit from collaboration on tests, treatments, and outbreaks. Which is also why you have others arguing that this sudden move, it poses a number of direct health threats, including setting back investigations trying to stop various viruses and monitoring bird flu outbreaks. But yeah, that is where we are for now on all of those fronts. You know, because this is, yes, a news show, but I also want it to be a conversation. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions here. Also, if you or someone you know are being impacted by the things that are happening here or potentially going to be impacted, I'd love to hear from you in those comments especially. Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also, a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.